When I buy fermented vegetables, as long as I'm buying them from the fridge, I assume, and I look at the label, that they're not pasteurized. With dairy, other than a couple of the cheeses that are marked otherwise, usually, if not always, it's marked pasteurized. So when you're
Yes.
buying, say, a kefir, a yogurt, are you assuming they're pasteurizing and then fermenting after? Or just a lot of the bacteria has been killed when it is pasteurized? It's always been a question of mine. What are you actually getting from the fermented dairy once they pasteurize it?
So I've looked into it. As far as an industry standard goes, it's pre-fermentation. They pasteurize that milk. So what that means is they're taking milk that's largely commercially available to them, that's pasteurized, and then they add select cultures of microbes to that pasteurized milk to ferment it into yogurt or to make kefir or to make blue cheese or some kind of aged Gouda or aged cheddar. So it's always pre-fermentation. I suppose some knucklehead could make a cheese and or kefir or yogurt and try pasteurizing it again afterwards, but then it would kill the beneficial cultures that have been allowed to grow in there. But I'm not aware of a single commercial operation that does it that way. It would be completely unnecessary. It would add expense, and it would likely detract from the palatability, Jesse. I think of that product. So I don't think you ever have to worry about it. If you're buying something, like a kefir or yogurt, it's going to be only pasteurized pre fermentation. And the other thing I would say about that is that you have the in the consumer market, you can take cheeses that are made from raw milk and you can ferment. And you can't do that yet with yogurt or kefir in some states where they have laws against raw milk, that hasn't been pasteurized. But I'm not aware of a single state that doesn't allow cheese because it's so aged and it's so protected against being sold raw cheese, raw milk, aged. It just the pathogenicity is no longer a threat in raw aged cheeses. So I think we might get there eventually with yogurt and fermentation too, but those aren't as aged nearly as long and not and so the carbohydrate reduction generally is not as great, and so pathogenicity would be slightly higher or at least moderately higher in something like a yogurt or a kefir product because the fermentation would not be as complete. So very interesting questions. I think, and another point I would just opine on with regard to fermented dairy products as opposed to fermented vegetables is we're seeing some very interesting studies where fermented dairy has some powerful impact on diseases, and particularly like ALS. And we're seeing certain species, I think it's, if I remember, HLA 214, if I remember the correct species, 214 sticks in my head more, H214 maybe, that is aligned with significant improvement when it comes to reduction in symptomatology with Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS. And so I think these microbes, as we find out about them more and more, portend new areas of research where natural strategies can be very beneficial and helpful with disease mitigation, maybe disease eradication, and certainly from the perspective of prevention. I think if we're seeing some diminishment in symptomatology, it may also be very helpful for the motivated human being to be consuming it to maybe avert the advent and onset of these serious diseases in the first place. In other words, get your kids eating these fermented products and fermented dairy, especially, to help to reduce their risk for these really bad players of chronic disease.
Interesting. And I know in general, you're not a fan of unfermented dairy. You talked about the carbohydrate content there quickly. So, do you have any regular milk? And what about things like heavy cream and half and half?
Yeah, I've abandoned consuming. I used to drink raw milk, but it is very rich in carbohydrates. And my opinion about this, and I'm not, I'm a scientist, and I have to say, I'm trying to find the very best strategies. I'm convinced about, visceral fat and these other areas, and meat and microbes. But when it comes to dairy, my current opinion is I don't think adults should be consuming dairy unless it's fermented. And the position for that is that's what babies do. Babies can actually ferment dairy in a way that human adults can't. So they're basically better thought of as little fermentation factories. And they have a different species of microbes, particularly if they're breastfed. And it's commensal. They have this symbiotic relationship between the mother, especially to the extent the mother's healthy, that the baby is acquiring microbes from the mother, and the baby is also sharing microbes with the mother as it's involved in lactation and breastfeeding. So it's this bidirectional exchange of microbes occurring in a very sophisticated manner. And these microbes and the milieu, the composition of the microbes within the healthy infant gut allows it to process milk perfectly and to ferment through fermentation it into a product that really allows it to be optimally absorbed. And that I'm going to guess too, I mean, I don't know. I have to ask this, wonder about this. I think adults would have this fondness of holding babies in part because I think in the past they shared those microbes with us when they would spit up and they would have diarrhea. I mean, we didn't have diapers before. These babies would make a mess, and I almost imagine, these microbes would somehow get. Not imagine. I know they would. If they get on a human being, they're going to get inside the human being. You're going to get, unless you sterilize your hands, and that wasn't happening back 20,000 years ago. So I think babies are very unusual in their ability to metabolize, and adults should not be consuming dairy because we're just not going to be as good about it. But it might be possible down the road um, to acquire some microbes that allow us to potentially ferment dairy and consume it in a non-fermented form, where you might be able to enjoy ice cream. And then to your question about heavy cream, I've abandoned that too. I've noticed that um, I tend to have a slow accumulation of visceral adiposity with the consumption, even of heavy cream, even though it has minimal amount of microbes. It I don't know. It had this strange kind of almost attraction to it, and almost a and not quite an addiction, but cravings would be a fair way of describing it. So I recommend not consuming heavy cream, and even this kind of popular trend. Some people in the carnivore community want to eat carnivore ice cream, where it's just heavy cream and egg yolks that are basically kind of creamed up together, and it might taste super yummy, but I think it's probably best avoided. Now, what I would do is take that and ferment it. Now, I think that would be very interesting to kind of have a fermented ice cream, fermented fats. And I think that'd be very interesting, kind of like frozen sour cream. I make my own sour cream. I ferment my own sour cream, and it's wonderful. In fact, it tastes way better than store bought, and I don't have cravings for it. I like it. I consume it with meat. I find, I consume it like a garnish, like I would any other ferments, like kimchi, kvass, fermented sauerkraut, or fermented carrots, or whatever vegetables, I'm choosing, fermented beets and whatnot to add to the meat. I add a little bit of thin layer of fermented homemade, Dr. Sean sour cream, and it's really fantastic as just kind of instead of like ketchup or steak sauce, I put fermented sour cream, on my steak, and it's fantastic.
One of the other things I've heard you talk about more recently in the fermented dairy realm is L-reuteri yogurt that was originally popularized by Dr. William Davis. So talk about that inclusion and what you've noticed there.
Yeah, God bless Bill Davis. I think he's right about Al Ruderai. Um, Now, he's persistent. He found out about it. He's done a lot of studies, and he's probably the world's expert on Al-Ruderai's application in a clinical setting. There may be some microbiologists that might know anecdotally, from a research standpoint, more nuances about Al-Ruderai, but to kind of sum it up, it's this particular species of microbes of which it's just one. Keep this in perspective, Jesse. I think it's worth keeping in perspective of about 70 trillion. Okay. We got so many of these things inside of us. So I'll rooterize just one. We're going to learn about a lot of other ones. But what's interesting about it is it's aligned generally with better health. It's aligned with a diminishment of sarcopenia. So you have an ability to reduce the amount of muscle atrophy, which means you can preserve your muscle mass a little bit better taking L-Reuteri, and also muscle performance. So the functionality of the muscle is enhanced by the presence and introduction of L-Reuteri. And it also improves the production of oxytocin and nitric oxide. So these other beneficial molecules within the body are enhanced in their production, endogenous production within the body. And then it seems to improve in studies empathy. So what it does, it seems to make you a human being with greater empathy. And I would have to say that that's a pretty noble thing. And I think we want to care more about humans and nature. If you care more about you're less selfish, and so you're selfless, and you are more inclined to think about your fellow human being, humanity. Nature wants you to stick around more to make positive contributions to society. So anecdotally with me, I'm just going to share it. It's like crazy. I've just found out about this for the past year. I've been doing this Al-Ruderai. And one of the things about me is I am kind of like on the spectrum. So the new term is like neurodivergent. And when it comes to me, I'd be like, I always say I'm like Mr. Spock, no emotions, no feelings. you know, it could be some drastic emergency in the ER, and I would be right on it without an emotional response. And my wife is like, you have no emotions. You got to feel more for me. You got to feel more for the kids. All this kind of stuff. Now I'm eating this Ruderai. Oh my God, I feel like I've got a new life. Like suddenly I got this new perspective of my wife, my kids, my patients, my clients in front of me. I'm not kidding. Sometimes I start to cry, when I'm with my client because I see the disease and I want to help them so much. And never before has that happened. And so the one attribution I'm saying has caused this change in me, it's not old age. I think it's the L-Reuteri, because I am making this L-Reuteri and I eat it about how much? About 2 to 3 tablespoons a day. I think there are a lot of people out there, men and women, that are eating too much, including Bill Davis. Bill, if you're listening, you watch this video. I think you're eating too much, man. Your face is big, and I think your tummy is big. You only want some of this stuff, and you don't want to have a microbiome that's predominant in L-Reuteri. You just want it present and not in a deficient form. So remember Noah's Ark, 2 of every species. You don't want half the boat filled with L-Reuteri and diversity in the other half. You want to have a small amount. So I shoot for about 2 to 3 tablespoons. And this has got the old colonel tearing up when I'm talking to people. I love my wife. I love my family. Even I feel it. I've always loved them, but I got this empathy. So give it a try. If you never tried it, Google Bill Davis. He's got lots of recipes. It's so simple. Good God, is it simple to make. So find out about it, make it, and you'll see these changes happening to you.
The one change you make in your book versus Bill's recipe is no inulin. So talk about why
Yeah.
you omit that.
I think inulin increases the texture and the palatability. But I am not a fan of the fibrotic addition of it, and it tends to be a processed form. And when you process nature, I might take it in a natural form and ferment it naturally, and then add it to the yogurt. But the inulin tends to be kind of almost like an added starch, to kind of emulsify or something, add it to make it more creamy and more palatable. And the goal isn't to make this stuff taste good. The goal is to make you better. So quit trying to do a technique to improve the texture and the characteristics from a palatability standpoint. If you keep making it so tasty, you're going to get fat. Like I think is what's going on with Bill. I almost wish somebody shares this with them. It's like, come on, Bill, wake up. I think you're eating too much of that stuff, you know. And the other people. I mean, it seems like those user groups. There are a lot of heavy people, so cut out the inulin. The other thing I do that Bill doesn't do, and I think in the community, I take my batch and I put it in a pint-sized jar, and then I stick it in the closet for another 3 to 5 days in room temperature, and I ferment it more. And I find that it improves the character and the quality of that. And maybe that's why it's making me cry and making other people just be a little bit more empathetic. It significantly increases the the colony counts and reduces the residual carbohydrates even more. So yeah, the Sean O'Mara, Dr. Sean version of the Dr. Bill Davis version of L-reuteri is to do a second fermentation of that and make it even more sour. And I'm getting fantastic results with this L-reuteri. So big thumbs up on L-reuteri.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
I'm talking to you right now. If you got a chronic disease and you're not getting rid of your visceral fat, stop complaining. Don't wait for your doctor to tell you to do this because it's literally kept out of medical school. Just get rid of it.